The moment Owen stepped through the grand arched entrance of the Harrington estate, holding Gabriel's hand, every head in the opulent garden turned. Whispers erupted like wildfire as the billionaire's only son, long thought to be the perfect heir, had just shattered the illusion in front of 500 elite guests. Champagne glasses paused mid-air, and the string quartet faltered for a split second before recovering. Richard Harrington stood at the altar beside his much younger fiancée, Elena, his face draining of color beneath the perfect tan. Owen felt Gabriel's fingers tighten around his own, a silent anchor in the storm they both knew was coming. They had driven up the winding driveway in Gabriel's modest Prius past the rows of Rolls-Royces and Bentleys without an invitation. Owen's charcoal suit fit like it was made for him, which it was tailored in San Francisco, where they had built a life far from this world of private jets and boardroom deals. Gabriel wore navy with a subtle silver tie that caught the California sunlight, making his warm brown eyes stand out. At 27, he still looked like the freelance photographer who had spilled coffee on Owen's laptop 2 years earlier in a tiny Mission District cafe. That accident had started everything: the late-night talks, the first tentative kiss, the slow realization that Owen no longer had to pretend. Now here they were, crashing the wedding of the decade. Richard's marriage to Elena was supposed to be the crowning achievement of his empire, a merger of old money and new influence. Owen hadn't spoken to his father in 18 months, not since the last screaming match about responsibility and carrying the Harrington name. Owen's mother, Claire, sat in the front row clutching a lace handkerchief, her eyes already glistening. She had known for years, whispered hints over phone calls, but never pushed. Today her secret support would be tested. Owen scanned the crowd, recognizing cousins, uncles, business partners who had once patted him on the back at polo matches and asked when he would settle down with a nice girl from a good family. None of them knew the nights he had spent in college forcing himself to date women just to keep the peace. None of them knew the panic attacks in bathroom stalls after family dinners, or the way he had deleted every photo of Gabriel before flying home for holidays. Today, all of that ended. Gabriel leaned in close enough for only Owen to hear. "You sure about this?" His voice was steady, the same calm that had talked Owen through every doubt for 2 years. Owen nodded once, his throat tight. "We're doing this together." They walked forward down the white petal-strewn aisle, the guests parting like the Red Sea. A few phones were already out recording. Owen's heart hammered, but for the first time in his life the beat felt honest. Richard stepped down from the altar, his custom tuxedo suddenly looking too tight. "Owen, what the hell is this?" The words carried across the garden, amplified by the sudden silence. Elena touched his arm gently, but Richard shrugged her off. Owen stopped 10 feet away, still holding Gabriel's hand. "I'm here to celebrate your new beginning, Dad. And to start mine." The words hung in the warm afternoon air, heavy with everything left unsaid for decades. Claire rose from her seat, her voice soft but clear. Richard let them speak. But the damage was already done. Cameras flashed from the press section at the back. The perfect wedding was unraveling, and Owen felt strangely free. Gabriel squeezed his hand again, a reminder that whatever came next, they faced it side by side. Owen had spent years running from this moment, yet now that it had arrived, he realized the fear was smaller than the love he carried. The guests murmured names. Gabriel, who is he? Is he? The truth was out there, floating on the breeze, and nothing would ever be the same. Owen took one more step forward, ready to speak the words he had rehearsed 1,000 times in the mirror of their small apartment. "Everyone, this is Gabriel, my partner. And I'm gay." The sentence landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through every corner of the estate. Richard's face twisted in disbelief, and something deeper, something Owen couldn't yet name. The ceremony had barely begun, and already the Harrington empire was trembling. Owen's mind flashed back to the morning they left San Francisco, Gabriel packing the car, while Owen stared at the invitation he had never received. They had talked for hours about consequences, inheritance, lost friendships, the possibility of total silence from his family. Gabriel had said simply, "I'll be there no matter what." That promise had carried them 400 miles to this moment. Now, with every eye on them, Owen felt the weight of years of hiding lift. The sun shone brighter, the flowers smelled sweeter, and for the first time, he wasn't performing. He was simply himself. The crowd waited breathless for Richard's response, the string quartet completely silent now. Owen met his father's gaze and refused to look away. This was only the beginning. Richard Harrington's voice cracked like thunder across the garden. This is not the time or the place, Owen. But the place had already been chosen by Owen's deliberate arrival, and the time was now. Elena whispered something to Richard, her face calm, almost knowing. Owen noticed at the slight nod she gave him like a secret ally. Gabriel stood tall, beside him, shoulders relaxed the way he always did when facing difficult clients or tight deadlines. The guests shifted uncomfortably, silk dresses rustling, expensive watches glinting in the sunlight. Someone coughed. Someone else started typing furiously on a phone. Claire moved forward, her heels clicking on the stone path. She embraced Owen first, then turned to Gabriel with a warm smile that surprised everyone, including her son. "I've heard so much about you, Gabriel. Welcome." The simple words cut through the tension like a knife through silk. Richard stared at his wife as if she had grown a second head. "Claire, you knew." The betrayal in his voice was raw. Claire lifted her chin the same way she had when she married Richard 30 years ago against her own family's wishes. "I suspected, and I waited for our son to tell us when he was ready." Owen felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, but he blinked them back. This was not the plan. He had expected rage, not this quiet fracture in his parents' united front. Gabriel spoke for the first time, his voice steady and respectful. "Mr. Harrington, I love your son. I'm not here to cause a scene, but I won't hide either." Richard's jaw tightened, the famous negotiator who had closed billion-dollar deals now speechless. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should take a short recess?" But recess wasn't an option. A cousin Owen barely remembered stepped forward, phone in hand, already live-streaming. "Is this for real? The Harrington heir is gay." The word echoed, and Owen felt the old shame rise, but Gabriel's hand grounded him. They had practiced this 2 late-night conversations about what if the press got involved, what if the board reacted. Owen had built a tech startup of his own in San Francisco, small, but profitable enough to survive without his father's money. Still, the empire Richard had spent 40 years building hung in the balance. Public image, stock prices, everything. They moved to the side of the garden, near the rose arbor, away from the main crowd. Richard followed, his face a mask of controlled fury. "You disappear for months, then show up with him, and expect me to smile for the cameras?" Owen met his father's eyes. "I expected you to love me, Dad. The way I am." The sentence landed heavier than he intended. Richard looked away toward the ocean visible beyond the cliffs. For a moment, the billionaire seemed smaller. Gabriel stayed silent, giving them space, but never letting go of Owen's hand. Flashbacks flooded Owen as they stood there. The boarding school where he had kissed a boy in secret and then denied it for years. The debutante balls where he danced with girls while texting Gabriel under the table. The night he told his college roommate the truth and watched the friendship dissolve overnight. Gabriel had changed all of that. Their first real date had been a hike in Marin Headlands where Gabriel listened without judgment as Owen poured out every fear. "You don't have to be anyone's idea of perfect," Gabriel had said then. Those words had become Owen's mantra. Now Claire joined them, placing a hand on Richard's arm. "This doesn't have to ruin the day. Elena understands." Richard spun toward his fiancée. "You knew too?" Elena nodded gently. "Owen called me last week. I told him to come." Love is love, Richard. The revelation hit Richard like a physical blow. The man who controlled markets and politicians had been the last to know about his own son. Owen watched his father's shoulders slump and for the first time felt something like pity. The misunderstanding had been years in the making, but the truth was finally here. A server brought water glasses on a silver tray as if this were any other cocktail hour. Gabriel accepted one with a quiet "thank you." His photographers, taking in every detail, the way light hit the fountain, the tension in Richard's jaw, the way Claire's hand trembled slightly. Owen knew Gabriel would remember it all later, sketch it out in his notebook, the way he documented every important moment of their life together. Richard exhaled slowly, the sound of a man recalculating. "We will discuss this later. Privately. Right now I have 500 guests expecting a wedding." But the guests were already whispering, networking, texting. The story was spreading faster than any press release. Owen nodded once. "We'll stay for the ceremony if you'll let us. Then we talk." Richard didn't answer, but he didn't order security either. That small mercy felt like victory. As they walked back toward the seats, Owen caught Gabriel's eye. The love there was steady, unshakable. Whatever happened next, the sacrifice of coming here, the risk of losing everything, it had been worth it for this moment of honesty. The quartet resumed playing softly, and the guests pretended to focus on the bride and groom, but every glance kept returning to Owen and Gabriel sitting together in the second row. Claire smiled at them from the front. Richard stared straight ahead. The ceremony continued, but the real vows, the ones that mattered, had already been spoken in the aisle. Owen leaned toward Gabriel and whispered, "Thank you for being here." Gabriel smiled, that crooked smile that always made Owen's chest tighten. "Nowhere else I'd rather be." The afternoon stretched on, but the foundation of Owen's old life was already cracking, and he welcomed the light pouring through. The vows were exchanged in a blur of rehearsed poetry and forced smiles. Richard kissed Elena, but his eyes kept drifting to Owen and Gabriel. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause was polite but distracted. Guests lined up for photos, yet many clustered in small groups, phones glowing with notifications. Owen could feel the shift. The story of the gay son had already eclipsed the wedding itself. He and Gabriel stood near the fountain sipping sparkling water, while waiters circulated with canapes. Then the first real confrontation arrived. Richard's younger brother Victor approached, his face flushed from whiskey. "You always were dramatic, Owen. Couldn't let your father have one day without making it about you." The words stung, but Owen had expected worse. Gabriel stepped forward calmly. "This isn't about drama. It's about truth." Victor laughed bitterly. "Truth? In this family? Good luck, kid." He walked away, leaving a trail of expensive cologne and resentment. Owen felt Gabriel's hand on his lower back, steadying him. Later during the cocktail hour, Claire pulled Owen aside near the terrace. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart." "I always was." She told him about the letters she had written and never sent, the nights she had cried alone, knowing her son was suffering in silence. "Your father loves you in his own way. He just doesn't know how to say it yet." Owen hugged her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume. For years he had assumed she would side completely with Richard. This quiet alliance felt like a bridge he hadn't known existed. Gabriel mingled easily, chatting with a tech executive about photography and light. Owen watched him. The way Gabriel's laugh lit up his face, the confidence that came from never having to hide who he was. Owen envied that ease, even as he admired it. A woman Owen recognized as a board member approached him. "The investors are nervous, Owen. Public image matters." Her tone was polite, but the warning was clear. Owen smiled tightly. "My personal life doesn't change the company's numbers." She raised an eyebrow and moved on. The real blow came during the first dance. Richard and Elena swayed under the fairy lights, but halfway through the music, Richard stopped and walked straight to Owen. "My office." "Now." The command was low but unmistakable. Gabriel started to follow, but Owen shook his head. "I need to do this alone." The study smelled of leather and old books, the same room where Richard had taught Owen about stocks at age 10. Richard closed the door and poured 2 glasses of scotch. "Explain." Owen took the glass, but didn't drink. He told the story from the beginning, the confusion in high school, the fear in college, the day he met Gabriel and finally felt seen. Richard listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When Owen finished, Richard stared into his drink. "I built this for you, Owen. Everything. And you throw it away for what?" The pain in his father's voice surprised Owen. "Not throwing anything away, Dad. Just asking you to see me." Richard set the glass down hard. "The board will want a statement. The press is already calling it the scandal of the year. Your mother knew and didn't tell me. Elena knew. Everyone knew except me." The betrayal cut deep. Owen saw it, then the man who controlled empires hated being the last to know. "I was scared, Dad. Scared you'd stop loving me." Richard looked away toward the window where the party lights twinkled. "I never stopped loving you. I just don't understand this." The admission hung between them, fragile and honest. They returned to the reception in silence. Gabriel waited by the bar, his expression concerned. Owen kissed his cheek right there in front of everyone, a small act of defiance and love. The guests noticed. Phones rose again. But Owen didn't care. The misunderstanding with his father had been a wall, now it was a door slightly ajar. As the evening deepened, a childhood friend named Marcus approached. Marcus had been Owen's cover date to 3 different galas. "Dude, you could have warned me. I look like an idiot now." His laugh was forced. Owen introduced Gabriel and watched Marcus size him up. The conversation turned awkward quickly and Marcus excused himself. Later, Owen learned Marcus had tipped off a gossip site for money. The betrayal stung, but Gabriel held him close under the stars. People show their true colors eventually. Elena found them near midnight, her wedding dress glowing. "Thank you for coming, Owen. And Gabriel, I'm glad I finally met you." She hugged them both, and Owen realized she had risked her own new marriage to support him. The gesture meant more than he could say. The night ended with fireworks over the ocean, but the real sparks were inside Owen. He had faced his father, faced the crowd, faced himself. The road ahead was uncertain, but the man beside him made every step feel possible. Gabriel drove them to the small hotel they had booked miles from the estate. In the quiet car, Owen finally let the tears come. Gabriel pulled over and held him until the shaking stopped. "You were brave today. I love you more than yesterday." Owen smiled through the tears. "Tomorrow we talk again." And the day after that. The drive continued into the night, the stars above them brighter than any chandelier at the wedding. The first crack in the family armor had appeared, and Owen intended to widen it with honesty and time. The morning after the wedding, Owen woke to his phone vibrating with dozens of notifications. Headlines screamed, "Harrington heir comes out at father's wedding," complete with blurry photos of him and Gabriel holding hands. Gabriel was already up making coffee in the hotel room's tiny kitchenette. "Stock is down 3% already," he said calmly, handing Owen a mug. Owen scrolled through the articles, some supportive, some vicious. One tabloid called it a publicity stunt. Another praised his courage. The duality exhausted him. They drove back to the estate for the promised family meeting. Richard had texted at dawn, neutral and brief. Claire greeted them at the door with fresh pastries and a hug that lasted longer than usual. The study felt smaller in daylight. Richard sat behind the massive oak desk, Elena beside him, looking composed. "Sit." The word was not a request. Owen and Gabriel took the leather chairs facing him. Richard slid a folder across the desk. "The board wants you to issue a statement distancing the company from any lifestyle issues." Owen opened the folder and read the drafted press release. It was cold, clinical, denying nothing but minimizing everything. He closed it. "I won't sign this." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Then you risk losing your shares, your position, everything I built for you." The threat hung heavy. Gabriel spoke quietly. "With respect, Sir, Owen has his own company now. He doesn't need the shares to survive." The conversation spiraled. Richard listed every sacrifice he had made, the late nights, the deals that almost broke him, all so Owen could inherit a legacy. Owen countered with the years he had spent pretending, the therapy he had paid for himself, the nights he considered ending it all rather than disappoint his father. Claire intervened softly, reminding Richard of his own brother who had died young and alone because the family had rejected his truth decades earlier. The room went silent. Richard's face paled. That was different. Times were different. But his voice lacked conviction. Elena added her perspective. "I married you knowing about Owen. I want a family that's honest, Richard. Not perfect." The words landed like a quiet bomb. Richard stood and walked to the window, staring at the ocean. Minutes passed. When he turned back, his shoulders were lower. "I need time. But I won't cut you off, Owen. Not yet." It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. Owen felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. They left the study and walked the grounds, Gabriel photographing the roses while Owen processed. Marcus called apologizing for the leak, but the damage was done. The betrayal from someone Owen had trusted since childhood hurt more than the headlines. Gabriel listened without judgment, then suggested they drive to the beach to clear their heads. On the sand, Owen finally voiced the fear he had carried since the Isle. "What if he never accepts us?" Gabriel stopped and faced him. "Then we build our own family. You, me, and whoever comes next." The simplicity of it grounded Owen. Back at the hotel that evening, a delivery arrived from Claire. Inside was a photo album. Owen had never seen pages of him as a child, with Richard smiling at Little League games, beach trips. A note read, "He was always proud, even when he didn't know how to show it." Owen cried again, this time with Gabriel's arms around him. The misunderstanding with his father was shifting into something more complex: grief for lost years, hope for new ones. The next day brought another twist. Richard's lawyer called. The board had voted to remove Owen from the succession plan unless he agreed to image rehabilitation. Owen laughed bitterly and refused. Gabriel celebrated by cooking pasta in their hotel room, playing old jazz records. They danced in the small space, laughing for the first time in days. The sacrifice was real, the inheritance gone, but the freedom tasted sweeter than any trust fund. Claire visited them secretly that night, bringing documents. Your father signed these. Your shares are protected, but the voting rights are limited. It's a start. She hugged Gabriel too, calling him son for the first time. The gesture nearly broke Owen. As she left, she whispered, "Give him time. He's reading books on the subject." I left them on his desk. The image of the powerful billionaire studying LGBTQ plus acceptance literature was almost funny. Almost. Owen and Gabriel drove back to San Francisco the next morning, the city lights welcoming them home. The apartment felt smaller, yet infinitely larger now that the secret was gone. Owen stood on the balcony, watching the fog roll in. Gabriel joined him, wrapping a blanket around them both. We survived the wedding. We'll survive the rest. Owen turned and kissed him slowly, the kind of kiss that promised forever. The journey had cost them status and security, but it had given them something priceless: honesty. The family rift was still there, but bridges were being built, one careful conversation at a time. Owen slept that night without nightmares for the first time in years. 3 months passed in a blur of interviews, small business growth, and quiet family dinners. Owen's startup secured new funding from allies who admired his courage. Gabriel's photography exhibit opened in a Soma gallery, featuring images from the wedding day, the tension, the love, the light breaking through clouds. Richard attended the opening unannounced, standing at the back in a simple jacket. He didn't speak to Owen, but he bought the largest print, the one of Owen and Gabriel by the fountain. The silent gesture meant more than any press release. Claire organized a weekend at the estate neutral ground. No press, no board members, just family. Richard grilled steaks the way he had when Owen was 10. Conversation stayed safe until dessert. Then Richard cleared his throat. I read the books. And I talked to a therapist. It's not what I expected. The admission was clumsy, but genuine. Owen felt tears rise again. Gabriel reached under the table and squeezed his knee. Elena smiled encouragingly. The evening ended with Richard shaking Gabriel's hand firmly. Take care of my son. For words that carried decades of weight. But not everything healed smoothly. Victor filed a lawsuit claiming emotional distress over the family scandal, demanding shares. The betrayal from within the family reopened old wounds. Owen spent weeks in meetings with lawyers while Gabriel kept him sane, with evening walks and bad movies. One night, after a particularly brutal deposition, Owen broke down. I'm costing you everything. Gabriel held his face. You're giving me everything that matters. The reassurance became their anchor. The turning point arrived during a board emergency meeting. Richard surprised everyone by voting against the motion to fully sever ties with Owen. My son is not a liability. He is family. The words traveled through the corporate grapevine, and the stock stabilized. Owen received the news while cooking dinner with Gabriel. They celebrated with cheap wine and laughter until midnight. Marcus reached out again, this time sober and sorry. They met for coffee, and Owen listened to the regret. No friendship restored, but forgiveness offered. The act of letting go lifted another weight. Claire called daily, now sharing small updates about Richard's progress. He had joined a support group for parents. The image still made Owen smile. Gabriel proposed on a quiet Tuesday evening on their rooftop. No grand gesture, just the two of them under string lights he had hung himself. The ring was simple titanium with a small diamond. Owen said yes before the question was fully asked. They called Claire first, then Richard. The silence on the line lasted only seconds before Richard said, "Congratulations. Bring him home for Thanksgiving." The invitation felt like full circle. Planning the small wedding consumed their weekends. They chose a beach in Marin, simple chairs, close friends and family. Owen's mother offered to host the rehearsal dinner at the estate. Richard agreed without argument. The healing was slow but steady, each conversation chipping away at old walls. Owen found himself sleeping better, laughing easier. Gabriel documented every step with his camera, turning their story into art. One afternoon, Owen visited his father's office alone. They sat across the desk again, but the air felt different. Richard slid a new folder over. These are shares in your name. No strings. Just because you're my son. Owen accepted them not for the money, but for the meaning. They talked for hours about the past, the mistakes, the future. When Owen left, he hugged his father, the first real hug in years. The embrace lasted longer than either expected. Back home, Gabriel waited with takeout and open arms. Owen shared the day's events, and they toasted to second chances. The big turning point had come not in one dramatic speech, but in dozens of small, honest moments. The family that had once felt like a cage now felt like a home being rebuilt. Owen looked at the man he would marry and knew every risk, every tear had been worth it. The journey of identity was far from over, but the path ahead was lit with love and growing acceptance. The beach wedding was perfect in its simplicity. 50 guests watched as Owen and Gabriel exchanged vows under a wooden arch draped in white roses. Claire cried openly. Richard stood tall beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, the silence was golden. Gabriel's mother flew in from Chicago and hugged Owen like she had known him forever. The reception featured food trucks and a playlist curated by Gabriel's friends. No billionaires dominated the dance floor, just people who loved them. Richard gave a short toast. I didn't understand at first. I'm still learning. But I see how happy you are, and that's enough for me. The words weren't perfect, but they were real. Owen hugged his father tightly, cameras flashing this time with permission. Elena whispered congratulations and slipped Owen a small envelope. Later, it contained a note from Richard apologizing for the lost years. The gesture closed a chapter Owen had feared would stay open forever. Victor dropped the lawsuit after a private conversation with Richard. The family rift mended enough for holidays and birthdays. Owen's startup thrived, and he promoted Gabriel's work to galleries across the country. They bought a house in the hills with a studio for Gabriel and an office for Owen. Life settled into a rhythm of love, work, and chosen family. 1 year later, they returned to the estate for Richard's birthday. The garden looked the same, yet everything had changed. Owen stood at the same fountain where the truth had first spilled out and smiled at the memory. Gabriel joined him, camera in hand. Ready for the next chapter? Owen kissed him. With you always. Claire pulled them aside later, showing them a scrapbook she had made of their journey, news clippings, wedding photos, family portraits. Richard watched from across the room, a small, proud smile on his face. The acceptance Owen had fought for had arrived, not with fireworks, but with quiet, steady steps. They drove home, that night, windows down, music playing. Gabriel rested his hand on Owen's thigh. True or false? Was it worth every sacrifice? Owen laughed softly. True. 1,000 times true. The city lights welcomed them home, and Owen realized the search for identity had led him exactly where he belonged. True or false? Family acceptance is always worth the pain of honesty?